Fragrant Scent of Bath Soap, and all Chapter 9 of the book, Betel Nuts and Other Stories by Simeon G. Silverio, Jr. It happened during the summer of 1961 in their neighborhood on Platerias Street, Quiapo, the downtown area of Manila in the Philippines. They were living in an apartment on the second floor of their father's printing business. Across the street was a brothel, which had been there ever since anyone could remember. Why such an illegal enterprise could thrive for years until the present day was obvious. It enjoyed the protection of the authorities. He was reading a book behind a huge office desk, which faced the street in the reception area of the printing press. Though it was already 9 in the evening, the doors of the office were still wide open, with the folding panels that were supposed to cover it neatly tucked to the side. His father always wanted the panels closed after office hours, with just one half of a panel opened like a window. The reason was to prevent people from going inside the printing press in case there was the usual commotion, as a result of the frequent street fights that spilled out of the prostitution den. Sometimes the pimps got drunk and beat each other. Other times, Johns would assault the pimps once they discovered that their wallets were missing from their pants, that they would leave hanging on the sides of the cubicles where they did their thing with a prostitute. His father was worried one of the protagonists might run away and go inside the printing shop for safety, putting his personnel, if not members of his family, in harm's way. But that evening, he chose to disobey his father's instructions and had the frontage wide open. He wanted the cool breeze of air from the street to ventilate the humid surroundings inside. From where he sat, he could see the prostitutes and the pimps plying their trade, accosting the men passing by and asking them if they wanted to have a good time. Behind him was a movable wood panel that covered the main shop of the press from the view of people outside. That evening, only one machine, the Heidelberg letterpress automatic, was running, operated by Santos Benipayo, the second shift guy. By 12 midnight, Santos would be done, and he, the son of the owner, was supposed to close the shop until it is opened again at 8 o'clock the next morning. Upstairs, his family was already asleep. The noise caused by the printing machine did not bother him. He had been accustomed to it ever since they moved into the apartment 5 years ago. What distracted him were the prostitutes walking back and forth on the sidewalk. He knew most of them. They were his neighbors. Their children were even his playmates. One, Juanita, chose to accost potential Johns on the sidewalk of the printing press. She was standing by a parked car right in front of him, just 20 feet away. She was one of the prettier women in the brothel. She had a milky white complexion and striking features. He could tell she had a voluptuous body because she was wearing a negligee. To this day, he could not explain why, during that hot summer evening, she was able to get away wearing such an indecent clothing outside the house. It may be because Platerias was not a busy street and there were not too many people who would be scandalized by her attire. It was a medium-sized road that connected 2 commercial areas in Quiapo, Carrito and P. Pateno streets. From where he sat, he could tell Juanita had just taken a bath. Her hair was still damp, and the fragrant scent of her cheap bath soap wafted through the air. She hardly noticed him, as she was minding her own business. While he pretended to be concentrating on his reading, he would occasionally take a sneak peek at her, feasting his eyes on all of her seductive beauty. For a hot-blooded 14-year-old, she was not just an object of curiosity. Then it happened. A commotion from far across the streets caused the pimps and the prostitutes to scamper away. "Raid! Raid!" somebody shouted to warn his comrades. He could see 3 policemen, one in uniform, 2 in civilian clothes, running after Totoy and Ciso, 2 of the pimps, and Ciso's prostitute wife and Juanita's sister, Anita. It was one of the few times the police would conduct a raid of the den just to give an impression that the authorities did not tolerate illegal activity. Though it might just be for a show, those caught during the raid were actually brought to the police station and suffered the consequences by paying a hefty fine. The next day, they could ply their trade again right under the very noses of the authorities. Business as usual, as if nothing happened. But then, everybody would want to elude the police, lest he suffered the inconvenience of incarceration and shouldered the cost of paying the fine. To avoid arrest, Juanita rushed inside the printing press and hid behind a desk right beside where he sat. She squatted sideways facing his right leg. He could feel her hot breath blowing against his leg as he was then wearing short pants. He pretended he was not bothered by her action as he looked stoically towards the street. He did not know whether his heart was beating fast and hard because he was afraid the police might come in and discover the woman beside him, or whether it was due to some hormonal reaction. Although her face was just a few inches from his leg, he knew Juanita was not looking at it but staring blankly at nowhere, listening intently to the commotion outside and feeling the footsteps of the policemen in search of more culprits. Outside, the policemen were pacing back and forth in front of the printing press in search of more people to arrest. He could feel his knee buckling and his body stiffening due to the sudden turn of events. And he was conscious of the woman whose face was nearly pressed against his bare leg, fragrant scent of bath soap and all. The moment must have lasted forever. He tried to concentrate on the book in his hand, intently reading the text in his mind. It started with a slight blow of the wind. Slowly, it gathered strength and momentum, causing the trees to sway back and forth and the angry wind to howl. Suddenly, the rain clouds above burst and the rain heavily poured down. The clouds emptied themselves with rainwater and abruptly the rain stopped. Calmness permeated the air. Slowly, the sun peered through the sky and bathed the surroundings with its rays. After 20 minutes, he felt Juanita stirred and softly asked him, "May police paba? Are there any more policemen?" He looked far across the street and saw that everything was quiet. He shook his head. Juanita slowly peeked from behind the desk. She stood up, brushed down her negligee with her hand, and gently walked out. Before she would completely vanish from his sight, she looked back and gave him the sweetest, albeit naughty smile that had forever been etched in his young mind. And that closes the book on this matter. Subscribe to this channel to listen to more enjoyable stories like this. This is episode 9 of the YouTube channel, Our Life and Time Stories. Betel Nuts and Other Stories is published by Papyrus Books with email address papyrusbooks@yahoo.com. To order a copy of the book, go to Amazon.com and enter the name of the author, Simeon Silverio, in the browser.